Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Blake. I am the Animal Welfare Field Manager for Wild Welfare, and today I'm going to talk to you all about humane education to empower and improve animal welfare and management practices. And whilst that might sound like a bit of a long and confusing title, I'll explain it so that everyone can understand what it is that we've created and how we are using these approaches to tackle animal welfare issues. So firstly, I'd like you to consider the following. What is a welfare standard? We do use that term a lot, but what does it encompass and what does it actually mean? And then secondly, how can we make welfare standards engaging and accessible enough to provide a consistent level of good welfare for all animals under human care? So a problem that we have identified in the past is that the majority of standards are in English and sometimes only available to certain people or groups, for example, members of a particular association, meaning that those that might actually really need to access the welfare standard don't have access to it. And we wanted to see whether we could address that. And then thirdly, how do we utilise humane education to do all this? And I'll talk briefly about what humane education actually is and how we have utilised it. So firstly, just a little bit of information about wild welfare, who we are and what we do. So our vision is a world where every captive wild animal is able to thrive and live a good life. And we do this in a number of different ways, but the primary way is through the provision of practical and knowledgeable support for any captive wild animal facility across the globe. So we currently work in over 10 different countries, and that list of countries is growing all the time, which is great. And what we do is we try to encourage all sorts of different aspects of animal welfare, but the main thing is that we want to bring welfare to the forefront of every decision that a facility is making. And we do this through building positive relationships that are constructive and collaborative with people that work in these facilities at all sorts of different levels. So from keepers to curators and sometimes even governmental regulators too, because they do all have an impact. So we're often providing lots of different resources to these facilities which can help with welfare knowledge and animal husbandry skills. And a really important aspect of our work is that we are always working towards long-term change because we want to make welfare improvements which are sustainable. So all of us can go into facilities and make some suggestions for improvements, but we want to ensure that these kind of improvements can always be driven forward, even in our absence. And then finally, we do provide a lot of workshops and training, both theoretical and practical. And whilst we usually do work in project countries, as you can imagine at the moment, a lot of our training is virtual. So back to that first question, what is a welfare standard? It's a level of quality or attainment, and it's essentially a benchmark which can be used to measure against. So wild welfare has its own standard called the Core Fundamental Standards of Practice for Captive Wild Animals. And this standard helps support us in evidence-based procedures for systematic animal welfare auditing and assessment of facilities. But a standard can even be simpler than that. It can be an SOP or a safety protocol. So for example, something as simple as ensuring that meat and veg are prepped on two different surfaces within an animal feed kitchen. And that kind of benchmark is important so that we know what to measure against. So the Wild Welfare Standard is derived from published literature to do with any aspect of zoo and aquarium animal welfare. And because animal welfare itself is such a young science, it's really important that we keep up to date with all the latest research and we can pass that knowledge on to the teams that we work with. So the standardisation of animal welfare knowledge is key to ensuring those basic primary care practices are understood across a wider network as possible, and in order to effect positive changes for as many captive wild animals as possible. And these changes could be through measuring against a standard, so as I said before, using it as a benchmark, and identifying gaps and opportunities in all elements of animal welfare, which can feed into management decisions and care practices. And then these opportunities can be prioritised, which enables improvements to be made in a strategic way. And then that helps drive forward those changes again, hopefully, even after we have left that facility as well. So taking these core fundamentals, how do we make them accessible and engaging. So our standard is on our website, but it's an extensive and pretty complex document because animal welfare as a science is also extensive and complex. So the standard's based around the 5 domains of animal welfare compromise, and it's in English at the moment. But we have also been working to make it more accessible through translations of it. So we do currently have a version of it in Vietnamese, and we're working on a Spanish version too, and hopefully there'll be more translations of that standard in the future. And we wanted to basically address encapsulating all of the information within this standard and using it as a basis to create something that will ensure a consistent level of good animal welfare can be experienced by animals in captive facilities around the world. And then bringing in this humane education element. So humane education is defined as an approach to teaching that nurtures compassion. And using humane education encourages the connections to be made, so in this case between animal care staff and the animals that they care for. And humane education introduces core values, and through that it cultivates critical, strategic and creative thinking. And it's this that can drive forward positive changes in animal welfare through those connections. And an example of that is in this photo that you can see. We've got a keeper that we worked with out in Vietnam, and it was wonderful to see him making quite a strong connection with the lions that he had in his care. And he often didn't quite want to show that he did actually have this connection with them, but you could definitely tell it was there, and it was growing the more work that we did with both him and his animals. And in the end, he loved watching his lions interact with ice blocks, which is what you can see in the picture, and seeing how active and engaged it made the lions was a driver behind more ice blocks being made, and this keeper investigating more types of enrichment that he could provide to both his lions and the other animals under his care as well. So again, it was nurturing that compassion that was already there, and it was just bringing it to the forefront a little bit more. So we put all of these components together, our welfare standard, the accessibility issue, and the use of humane education to create a learning programme, and this is it.
Created to educate and empower animal care staff around the world, this unique and exciting e-learning programme aims to improve global animal welfare, and here's how. The interactive resource addresses knowledge gaps that may result in captive animal suffering and gives animal care staff the tools they need to provide optimal welfare. There are thousands of zoos and aquariums around the world. Some are providing good care for their animals, but unfortunately, many are not. To combat this, Wild Welfare's online learning programme creates accessible and engaging opportunities in which animal care fundamentals can be learned and understood. Delivered in bite-sized modules, our digital education programme helps learners to better understand the welfare needs of the animals under their care. Each module consists of 2 complementary aspects: a learning tool packed full of topical animal welfare information and an interactive quiz featuring all sorts of different activities, including video and multiple choice questions to test what's been learned. It's also important that this programme is as accessible as possible, so we will be translating it into multiple different languages, with Japanese being the first in 2021. Available across a range of different devices and free to access, visit the Wild Welfare website at wildwelfare.org to get started.
So identifying the barriers to developing positive relationships between animals and their caregivers is a critical element for improving animal welfare standards. So the 8 modules within the programme, alongside an introduction and a glossary, examine key elements of animal management and using that standard as a baseline for the information provided. So practically applying concepts and species knowledge to daily keeping activities, enclosure design, infrastructure and nutrition can make a huge difference to an animal's well-being and also to an animal care staff's confidence in their own abilities. So just to look at what the programme does, we actually have to look into how it impacts both the animals and the animal care staff. So through capacity building and strengthening confidence, animal care staff can feel upskilled and empowered to drive forward practical management changes. And the programme creates accessible and engaging opportunities in which animal care fundamentals that we took from the standard can be learned and applied, and that will bridge the animal welfare knowledge and skills gap to ensure best practice. So again, looking at how it will impact animal care staff, it will educate them, and it might even be going over stuff that the staff member already knows, but it might also be completely new to them. But then through that education, it will empower them to feel that they can drive forward positive animal welfare changes, and it can instill confidence in their own knowledge. And what's great is that might actually then go into, they will then teach that knowledge and those skills to other members of their team, and it might be something that they pass on for potentially generations, again because they will have that confidence. And then in terms of the animals, it will improve husbandry practice, and it gives animals an opportunity to thrive. And if we just look at a brief example of utilising something that's within the programme, so offering choice, comfort and control to an animal through its environmental infrastructure. So we all know the kind of case studies of individuals that are given the option for access to indoor enclosures during the day, and even if they don't use it, the option, that choice is still important, and that can have a massive impact on the fifth domain of the mental state and how that choice and control makes the animal feel. So if the animal care staff are taking those factors into consideration, it will provide a kind of overall improvement of overall welfare, and it will provide this net gain that can benefit anything from just a single animal all the way up to facility-wide improvements in animal welfare. So we wanted to bring in applied elements to the programme, and that was really important to us because not only did we want to make the programme engaging, but we wanted to ensure that it was reinforcing what had been learned by utilising applied elements such as questions, practical exercises and problem-based learning. Now, humane education encourages this kind of critical thinking, as I said before, and encourages it through questions which can help change mindsets and behaviours, and therefore it encourages learners to make a connection between themselves and the animals they care for. And this can then develop an empathy and understanding of how animals think, feel and experience. So we wanted to make the programme applicable to daily husbandry practices and encourage husbandry decisions to be based on the perspective which can improve an animal's care and quality of life. So as you can see from these examples, what we mentioned in the video, we've utilised lots of different types of questions and exercises, from multiple choice questions to pitch matching activities, and we've also got quick questions within the text itself, and that just helps break up the text and also encourages that reflective learning as they go through the programme. And then at the end of the programme, we do have slightly longer and more practical based activities at the end of each module. And that can sometimes encourage a learner to go out into their facility and really kind of think through what they've just learned and how they might make changes and highlight that too. So this is an example of how elements in the programme can be applied specifically to enclosure design. So enclosures is one of the modules that we have within the programme. And these pictures that you can see here were from a project that we worked on in conjunction with Animals Asia in Vietnam. And as you can see on the left, the enclosure was quite restrictive and didn't encourage the natural behavioural repertoire for the two sun bears living in it. So we discussed with the keepers what it is that bears need to be able to do in order to thrive. And we discussed elements such as foraging needs, investigative behaviours, climbing was another one. So the question was, how can we give them these opportunities within this limited space? And together we actually, with the keepers, we designed this multi-layer enclosure which offers the bears choice, comfort and control of their environment, which we all know is incredibly important for animal welfare. And we wanted to ensure that these bears could thrive in this environment. So during the build, we actually utilised the keepers' knowledge of the behaviours and preferences of the bears. And as I said before, that collaborative effort is a huge part of what we do within our work and how we want the programme to be utilised as well. And this picture is just showing another collaboration that we've done out in Thailand, and again just ensuring that we're involving all levels of animal care staff and getting their feedback and input too. So looking at how the programme has already impacted animal welfare across the globe, since its launch in January of this year, we have had loads of amazing feedback from all over the place. It's been great. So we've had people and facilities contact us from Italy, Singapore, Indonesia, Costa Rica, and of course the UK. And in particular, lots of places across Africa, which has been great. So one of those facilities was the Harola project in Kenya. And they reached out to us to let us know that the programme was being utilised within their organisation. And this wasn't only just with the care staff, so the hands-on field work with the endangered Harola that they do for the conservation work, but it was also as part of their own humane education programme. And they run these for hard-to-reach communities, and in this case, they were taking elements of the programme out to pastoral herders that they work with to improve their knowledge and skills too. And then we were also contacted again somewhere in Africa by Lorry Park Zoo in Johannesburg, and they were using the programme again with their own keeping staff, but then they were also taking some of the content of the learning documents and using that as educational posters around the zoo. So I'm looking forward to the photos that they said that they're going to send us once they've got those up. And then volunteers can also make use of the programme as well, and we've had some great feedback from volunteers who didn't actually have prior knowledge, which was great. So if you can see from the quote from Alison Shaw, she is a retired nurse who decided to volunteer in her local zoo in Scotland, and it really highlights how the programme can be utilised by someone without prior knowledge, and that animal welfare can still be impacted through that, which for us is really exciting and exactly what we wanted the programme to do. So a lot of educational aspects within colleges and universities are really benefiting from the programme as well. So they're using the programme with students who are studying to get into animal related careers, and that means that those students can bring what they've learned from the programme to the jobs they eventually get, and therefore that will improve welfare for future situations, which is very exciting. So we've had feedback from places like the University of South Africa and Spaarschot, so they're all using it within their courses. And then we've also heard from the Sutton Trust, and that's actually a charity providing opportunities for students, in this case training to be vets. And they've just gone through their first cohort using the entire programme within their summer school, which is very exciting. So for future plans, translation is what we are focusing on because accessibility is key. So we want to make the fundamentals of the welfare standard available to as many facilities as possible so that it can have an impact on as many animals and their care staff as possible. And we all know how important that is. So for example, for the Japanese version, which we're hoping to launch by the end of this year, we actually have links with Japanese facilities, including bear parks. We've got links with the Japanese Association of Zoos and Aquaria and plenty of other organisations within the country. So we can't wait to share this resource with them, and then that can lead to management and husbandry practices being changed and hopefully improved. So in the future, we're also thinking very much ahead, and we're planning on Vietnamese translations after the Japanese version has launched, Indonesian translations after that, and hopefully many more language translations into the future, because again, we want to make sure that it is as accessible as possible. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening. If anyone does have any questions, then please do feel free to get in contact with me via the email address there. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the